We have been going through the story of David, and Pastor Marenga started us with David and Goliath, and then last Sunday we went through the story of Jonathan and David and Saul. And when I left us last Sunday, I do hope that you were here, we ended at David out in the wilderness, running from Saul, Saul in hot pursuit after him, and Jonathan was just from encouraging David. So the idea this Sunday is to push the story forward. I told you that we are going to find David in the wilderness. Something is going to happen while we're there, which is the story we are going to look at today. But to catch you up before we get to chapter 25, which is where we are headed, what happens is that Saul is in hot pursuit, and then the Philistines, he is told that the Philistines are raiding his lands, and so he has to turn away from David to go and take care of that. And you know, God does things like that. So David experiences a bit of reprieve from Saul. And then in chapter 24, there is a community of people there who keep telling Saul where David is. They are called Ziphites. So they tell Saul again, see, David is in a certain place. So Saul goes after David, and I'm sure this story is familiar to you. It is where Saul goes to relieve himself in a cave, and then what happens is that the men are wanamchocha. I will not strike him twice, just let us hit him. And David refuses to do that, but he cuts a corner of Saul's robe, and later he presents himself to Saul and tells him, look, the Lord gave you into my hands, but I would not do this to you. And he begs Saul to spare his life, to stop hunting him down. And Saul fake repents. He repents, but it's fake because later he will still pursue him. He repents and says, I'm not going to do this, and I know that the Lord has determined that you will be king in Israel. When you're king, please spare my descendants. Do not kill them off. And David makes an oath to Saul, and then they part ways, and David experiences a bit of time where he is free from Saul pursuing him. In this time, many men have gathered around him, about 600 men of people who have issues at home, debts, you know, people who are running away from their masters, all kinds of rogue people, so to speak, but they are gathering themselves around David. So David kind of has a small army, so to speak. And this is where we find him in chapter 25, which is where we are headed today. Again, like I told you last Sunday, this is a narrative. And in narratives, there are so many lessons to be picked. And because each one of us, like I said last Sunday, are living our lives are very different from each other in so many, convoluted ways. And so in a narrative, there are many things that we can pick that are different from each other. And my hope and my prayer is that as you listen in, as you lean into this story, that as God opens your heart and your mind to see, that you will pick out the lessons that suit your life now, the space that you're in now, and that God will minister to you today. The characters that we are facing today, this is 1 Samuel chapter 25. David and Nabal and his beautiful and intelligent wife, Abigail. Now, all these three characters are very uncomfortable characters. Nabal is, the Bible, and I'm sure you know this, Nabal, the Bible calls him a fool. His name means fool. And later we will see that the Bible says, and folly goes with him. The thing is, the reason he's uncomfortable is when you read about him and you can see some things about yourself that are a bit similar to Nabal. It's very uncomfortable as you read and you see that. Abigail is also very uncomfortable because she's this, have you ever known someone who is nice and pure and perfect and holy and everything, and when you're next to them, your flaws seem to be exaggerated a little bit more? Yeah? So Abigail is also uncomfortable in that way. And David has always been uncomfortable. All the time you read about David and you wonder, why can't I write, journals like Psalms? Are you close to God like that? He's always poking at us as the children of God. So all of three of them are very uncomfortable. So as we read, you pick your lessons as you go. I'm going to mention some lessons here and there, but pick as many as you can. So I will read. I think I'm a fast reader, so I'm going to read through 1 Samuel 25. You follow along with me, and then we will learn from the story after I read it. 1 Samuel chapter 25. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours.' Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were here with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore, be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my sharers and give it to men who are coming from who knows where?" You know how that it sounds African, yeah? David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, "Each of you strap on your sword." So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him." Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, "Go on ahead, I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said to his men, I think, "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one meal of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men that my Lord sent. And now, my Lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift which your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord, your God, will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God, but the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling." Do you see how she references his fight with Goliath? That makes a man feel, When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak." Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, "Go in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head." Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel. Sijui kwa nini watu wakifika hapo hata first service walikwama hapo. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife." She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "I am your servant, and I'm ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Ladies in Nairobi. And then Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, her bridesmaids, went with David's messengers and became his wife. But because men are men, David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they both were his wives. But Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Galim. Right. So, as the story begins, a long, beautiful, winding, emotionally laden story. As it begins, we meet a wealthy man, the wealthy Nabal, who owns many animals and many servants, who would go out into the wild to take care of the animals. He is described, as we saw earlier, as mean and surly in his dealings. Let me give you other English synonyms that capture this mean and surliness of Nabal. And you can come up with others in your mind. Vocabulary yako mahali inafika. Unfriendly, bad-tempered, cruel, evil, wicked, obstinate, arrogant, that kind of man. You don't want that kind of man. Your boss, your husband, your brother, you don't want that kind of person around you. This was what Nabal was like. Now, when the story begins, it appears that David had already met Nabal's shepherds before. Because the story starts by David sending his shepherds to his men to Nabal to tell him, "While your men were with us, they were safe, we protected them, nothing of theirs was missing, da da da." And so the story kind of starts in the middle. He references already that he has already met with Nabal's shepherds while they were taking care of the animals out in the fields in the wilderness. And this already paints a picture of what Nabal was like when he is called mean and surly, because he sends his shepherds and his animals into the fields, and he does not provide protection for them. Why is this needful? Because in those days, it would, the Philistines would be raiding, taking animals, killing, and all of that. It's like how in Kenya, how I'm sure you hear from the news in Pokot, these people who have many animals and they take care of animals, they go to take them out to feed. You hear how raids happen and people are killed and animals are stolen and things like that. This was the kind of setting then. And so Nabal had sent shepherds and animals, but no protection for them. And being mean and surly, he probably would have required every single sheep, every single goat as soon as they come back. And meanwhile, because they would go for long, also those that were born, and what he would require from them everything that belonged to him, having provided absolutely no protection for those shepherds and for those animals. And David and his men, and I'm sure, this speaks to David's heart. He sees shepherds. He can see they have probably because they're not warriors, they cannot protect themselves. And so what does he do? He probably commands his men, these rogue people who have been coming around him, and the shepherds say this later, they were a wall around us. Yeah? And so David requires of his men, he sees a need and he serves the need. Let's take care of these people. Nothing of theirs will go missing. In fact, it seems, because he says nothing of yours is missing, it means that David maybe even stopped his own men from eating from those sheep. Yeah? So, he sees a need, he takes care of that need. And maybe this is one of the first lessons we can get from this story. To see a need and to take care of it. Not, can someone do that? I have seen that there's something going on there. Who is, just that. Now, possibly David thought, now that he had put his men to work for mean and surly Nabal, it's probably that he knew that Nabal was a rich man. Because rich men are known. So even you know rich men around town. It's probable that he was known, and probably David thought, now that I have offered this service and I have had my men, I have commanded my men to do this for Nabal, maybe I will receive a payment for this service, and especially seeing as Nabal was able to do this. However, Nabal, mean and surly as he was, does not respond to this kindness, and life kind of moves on. Yeah? Because when we begin the story, David is referencing a time that already happened. And now it's already sheep shearing season. Nabal, people came home, his animals were intact. Maybe he had that they were taken care of. He doesn't care, couldn't care to ask who did what. Life moved on. Never mind the service accorded to him. Never mind the kindness accorded to him and his shepherds. Life kind of moves on. So, David hears that Nabal was sheep shearing. Let me tell you, this is just a fun fact about sheep shearing, about the culture then. Whenever you read, so 4 instances in the Bible where sheep shearing seasons are mentioned. And it seems, which is what David is about to do now, it's kind of like people used to use those seasons to settle their scores. Do you remember Absalom and Amnon? Absalom has beef with his brother Amnon for sleeping with his sister. Time has gone on. David has not done anything about it. And what happens? In the sheep shearing season, it used to be a festive season. It's like after you have planted. I don't know whether some of you come from communities where coffee and tea, that season where you're harvesting and you get like a huge sum of money. And so a lot of festivities to go around, a lot of revelry, hence banquets like a king, what Nabal was doing later. So this would happen a lot. Let me use another example, Christmas time. You know how people will come together to party, to enjoy its festivities, good health to you and to you, as you can see David saying that. And usually, families will also take these moments to settle scores, shamba, nini, things like that will usually happen around those seasons. So even then, this is used to happen. This is what used to happen. So remember Absalom, Amnon, what happens is, it says, during the sheep shearing season, Absalom is planning a party. He intends to kill Amnon. And so what does he do? He asks his father, why don't you guys come with the princes so I can do this? But he intends to settle a score that has not been settled by his father. You remember Judah and Tamar? Back, earlier on, Judah is supposed to give Tamar his last son. But he doesn't do it. And the Bible tells us during the sheep shearing season, Tamar goes and positions herself and gets children. She settles her own scores for herself in that season. Remember Laban, now not Nabal, and Jacob? It is during the sheep shearing season that Jacob runs from him, and his what was her name? Rachel takes the household gods, and Jacob runs from Laban with all the animals and everything that he deems he deserves after working for Laban for so many years. And it was during that season. So this is just for your knowledge. It seems to, in Israel, this used to be a time where people would settle their scores. And so David has men here who have worked but have received no payment, and who even stopped from eating, probably from Nabal's animals, and nothing has been done. Life has moved on. And so during the sheep shearing season, David intends to settle. It isn't really a score for him because he doesn't demand it. What he does is, in my head I was thinking, maybe he probably thought, even rich men can be broke. And maybe Nabal didn't have money, but surely now, in the festive season, now he's shearing the sheep, a lot of wool, and that will mean a lot of money. Probably now he has something. And maybe at this point now, he can pay my men for what they did for him. And David does not even give a figure because the scriptures tell us, he says, see what you can spare. Whatever you can spare for my men, will be happy to receive. And your son, David, he humbles himself like that. It's a kind and polite request. So, the men go. Mean and surly Nabal returns his greeting and request with an insult. And he says, who is David? Who is the son of... You know, servants are running away from their masters nowadays. Why should he expect anything from me? The bread and the water and the meat that I'm preparing for my shearers. And never mind that later when his servants speak, you can tell he doesn't quite do anything for them. But he kind of tries to make it look like, no, my things are busy taking care of. So who is this man that I should do anything for him? Now, obviously, at this point, David was renowned. Why? If not for his defeat of Goliath, because we know the story from Pastor Madenge, people were singing, isn't it, about David all across Israel. So we can assume that David was known. But if not for his defeat of Goliath, then because Saul was pursuing him. And you know how it is. See, when a president is pursuing someone, we all know. Sindio? It's common knowledge when people in power are after someone. So it is likely, very likely, that Nabal knew who David was, but he pride and who is that? He was too proud to admit, to acknowledge David. More than that, he was too mean to give anything to David, let alone acknowledge the service that had been done to him. Festive seasons, it's one thing to say, simtugawie machapo, and we have not done anything. It's quite another if I have also done a service to you, and then I say, why don't you, but too mean, too selfish to do anything. This is something that I think many of us can learn from, because how Nabal responds to this shows a certain attitude of heart that he has, because it supposes, this is an attitude of heart that says, all I have is mine, and I will choose whether I can share it with you. Whereas, as believers, the attitude of our hearts should be, all that I have belongs to God. And so you can have it as well. Not it's mine, I will determine whether I will give it. All of it belongs to God. Have you ever, for those of you who drive cars, have you ever been you parked your car at your parking apartments, what were apartments, or even if you live in your own home, and you went and you slept, and in the morning you found the watchman had washed your car. And you can tell he's kind of expecting, 200, 300 kitu. And you say, mi nilikwambia ufanye hiyo kazi? Kama wewe ulikuwa umekosa kazi usiku ukaamua, hiyo ni yako. And you take your car and you drive off. Have you ever parked somewhere in a public place that didn't have security, and there are these boys who came later and they told you, boss, unajua tulikuangalilia gari, 20 bob, 50. And you say, me, did I ask you? Me, I parked my car. It is the Lord who protects. And you left. Maybe your housekeeper does something extra at home. Maybe you're a boss, you are a CEO, you are a company owner, and someone does something more than their JD prescribes. But you look at it and you say, but sisi contract inasema aje? You, if you decided, that's yours. What have I to do with you? You see, these things betray a certain position of heart, like I said earlier. What they betray is that you believe all you have belongs to you, and you will determine who, when, whether you will share. Not that everything belongs to God, it has been given to you and anyone else can have it. And so you can fail to acknowledge us. And mind you, you will drive off with a clean car and enjoy the clean car. Mind you, you will drive away with a safe car, side mirrors intact, wind screens, are they called wind screens? Intact, because you didn't ask for the service. You will eat that extra food. You will enjoy whatever service has been accorded to you and say, me, did I ask? It portrays a certain position of heart. And we should have hearts that say, what I have belongs to God, and anyone else can have it too. Now, David takes Nabal's words exactly how Nabal intended for them to be taken. Insulting. I'm intending to insult you, and you have heard it, and David had it. This isn't a high moment for David. Because Let me show you 3 ways in which it wasn't David. This wasn't a high moment for David. David was about to make a mess. You see, just previously, just in chapter 24 and in the previous chapters, Saul had done incredibly unkind things to David. But David had shown him incredible kindness and long-suffering. He had suffered long with Saul. Saul who had wanted to kill him. And now he receives an insult, not a spear, an insult. And he says, hey, okay, let me show you that I am a warrior. You are rich, but let me show you that I can kill you and take everything that belongs to you. And so he pursues. Strap up your swords, 400 men. We're going to kill off that household. You see, the question is, why wouldn't David be long-suffering with Nabal as he was with Saul? You see, maybe David saw Saul as his superior, and he saw Nabal as either his equal or less than him. Which, we all know, that the true test of our character is not how we treat our superiors. See, we all know that, we've heard about it. The true test of our character is how we treat those we deem equal to us or lesser to us. And I think David portrays this a little. He acknowledges Saul's kingship. He's a warrior. He acknowledges him. And so, my Lord, why are you hunting down a dog? He's long-suffering. But when Nabal sees an insult, he's about to clean his entire household. I think this is a lesson that we can learn too. The other thing is that David is about to return insult for insult, isn't it? Evil for evil. I did you good, you have done me evil. I will show you what evil looks like. You have insulted me. I'm about to pay it back. Twice, 3 times, 100 times over. This is something that the scriptures talk about in 1 Peter chapter 3. I want us to read that. I can see my time is gone. Will you give me a few more minutes? 1 Peter chapter 3. This is verse 9 to 12. It says, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, which is exactly what David was about to do. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. And God is so kind. He requires obedience for us, but sometimes he attaches to it something extra. Look at what it says. Do not repay evil for evil. Repay it with a blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a what? A blessing. Look at the blessing you're promised. If you do not return insult for insult or evil for evil. It says, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. And then it says, for the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. What the Bible is saying is that when we do not return insults for insults, we are righteous. And when we return insults for insults and evil for evil, we are wicked. We're evil. And so, do you want God to have his face turned to you when you're praying? And do you want God's ears to be attentive to you when you need him? Easy, or maybe a little hard. Do not return insults for insults. If you don't want God's face to be turned away from you but towards you, do not return insults for insults. So this is what David is about to do. The other thing that David is about to, in his reaction, these are David's reaction and the things that we can learn from it. The other thing is that he intends to wipe out an entire household, like I said earlier, because he felt insulted. This reaction wouldn't have been equal to the wrong that was done to him. We can agree on that, isn't it? Remember, I want us to remember this in our dealings with people. When we feel disrespected or dishonored or dismissed, disregarded, sometimes our reaction in the name of justice can go beyond the action that was done to us. And especially when we have power. When you're a father and the children are smaller, they can't match your strength, or your wife cannot match your strength, or you're a boss and the employee you can kick them out immediately. You know you have the ability to show them, disrespect, okay, let me show you what I can do to you. Especially when we have power, we can react, excessively, as compared to the wrong that has been done to us. We need to be careful about that. And those of us who are given to justice, this is something that we really need to ask the Lord for help with. Because sometimes we do have our facts right. Whatever has been done to us is legitimately wrong, but our hearts are not right. And so we can repay in the name of justice and cause more harm than what is a good thing, which is being like God in the sense of justice. So we need to go for God to really help us with this. Because sometimes, as the book of James will say, mercy triumphs over judgment. Right? Abigail. Beautiful, intelligent, demure Abigail. Abigail. Now, immediately aware that danger is now lurking over this household, a servant runs to Abigail and tells Abigail everything that has happened. These men have come from David. They have said this to Nabal, and I can testify it is true. Those men really, really protected us. But this is what Nabal has done. Now, he finishes by saying to Abigail, think it over and see what you can do. See, it's beautiful to see that the servants of this household knew that Abigail was a wise woman and she would know what to do in the face of danger, in the face of this is her household about to be wiped out. And the servants in her home know she is wise enough, she's intelligent, she will know what to do. You see, Abigail had built this reputation in her own home. She's a perfect picture of what the Bible will say of a wise woman. The Bible says a wise woman builds her own home. And she has built this reputation in her own home. She is wise. She is able to think through very difficult situations and provide solutions. Ladies, here's a question I have for us. What reputation have you built in your own home? When your husband thinks of you, when your children think of you, when your housekeeper thinks of you, the people who work around you, the shamba boys, the people in your household, what reputation have you built in your own home? Hearing the story, Abigail immediately knew, she immediately knew that David and his men deserved to be paid. She immediately acknowledged a service has been done to us. It was done to us. It should be paid for. But my husband has determined, who asked? And all they were asking for is food, which was in plenty. Why do we know that it was in plenty? Because she doesn't take long to gather so much to take to David and his men. And it wasn't, haikuanza kupikwa sayo. You know how vitungu start smelling and your husband, kwani kuna nini? It had already been done because Nabal does not notice that even things have been taken from whatever was already there. So there was a lot of it. But Nabal was mean and surly and, who's that? Why should I? So she just takes what is already there. There's already an abundance. All David is asking for is food. She takes it, the food and gifts, assembles them quickly, and runs out to save her household. When she sees David, the Bible says she gets off her donkey and bows before him. And I was just thinking, help me paint this picture. What must this have looked like? So, remember, Abigail is a beautiful woman, isn't it? And she's a rich woman because she belongs to a rich husband. So she's probably also very well dressed. Off on the donkey, beautiful woman, well-dressed woman. David is riding down because it says mountain ravine. You know what a ravine is like? It's like a gap, I don't know how to say, between mountain slopes. So she's kind of there, kind of hidden, and David and his men are descending down. 400 men, angry, furious. Now I was saying, now he's not cute anymore. Now he's a warrior. You know how you can see a cut on someone's face and know, yeah. A man's man is, that. And 400 rogue men riding down. And Abigail, beautiful, intelligent, probably very well dressed. And she sees him and she gets off her donkey and bows. You know how a man can come to a grinding halt in the face of a humility and beauty and... And David at this point is still cursing Nabal. It is useless. All the things I have done for that man. That's what he's saying as he's riding down. And then, you know how the horses will. Have you seen those movies? Even the horses, the two legs are. Because beauty and humility down. Huh? I don't know whether you guys, ladies, natunaambiwangwa aki, natuskiangi. Today we are trying, we will try again. God is a God of mercy. Beauty we have, humility is what we are working at. You see, I was thinking about this. I don't know whether you guys saw this on the news some time back. I think it was during the previous elections, and some people from Kibera had done something and the police had gone to go and kill them. I don't know if you remember that. And the women got down on their knees in Kibera and were asking, please don't kill our sons, our children. Do you guys remember that on the news? Do you know how the policemen looked confused? They were coming, orders given from commander. But in the face of a woman in humility and submission, it's very difficult. I don't know whether they become confused. I don't know what they become. They will tell us in the marriage conference. Something happens in the face of humility. So gorgeous, beautiful, well-dressed Abigail, down on her face. And then she opens her mouth and more humility comes out. Because beautiful, rich, privileged, the first words that come out of her mouth are, may I speak to you? Many beautiful, rich, and privileged people do not do that. When they arrive, everyone else was just too early. Now, I am here. The other thing she does many right things. The other thing she does is that she acknowledges guilt. And she asks for the guilt to be put on her. Not because she really thinks she's guilty, but I think because she believes that if the guilt is turned to her as part of the household, maybe the punishment will be lowered. And she accepts, we are due for that. What we have done is not right. But maybe she hopes if the guilt is turned on her, then maybe her household, the punishment due to her household will be reduced. The other thing she does is that she pays back what David and his men were owed for their service. And she says, she doesn't say to David, here you are. She says, here you, for the men, for your men, I acknowledge what they did for us. She pays back in full. The other thing that she does is that she plainly asks for forgiveness. I say that because in the Ahmad meeting that we had last month, the ladies were there for men to ask questions. And one of the questions they asked is, why can't women just ask for forgiveness? Why? We had no answer. Labda is humility issues and pride issues. So ladies, what Abigail does, she says, forgive your servant's presumption. Please forgive us. Please, plainly asks for forgiveness. After she has done that, calmed the man, done for him what he materially needed to be done, now she starts to do higher things. And what she does, one, is that she reminds him that it is the Lord's battles he fights. Not battles with men. It is the Lord's battles he fights. And she also tells him that the Lord was well able to avenge his enemies. Now she's beginning to lift his view up to the issues of God. Thanks. The other thing she does is that she reminds him of God's promise and plan to make him king. She reminds him, look, remember, you have a future. There is somewhere you are headed. And you do not need to have the burden of bloodshed. I'm sorry, so much activity. Thank you. So number one, she reminds him that it is the Lord's battles he fights. God is well able to avenge his enemies. And then she reminds him of God's promise and plan to make him king. And she tells him, when you're king, you don't need to have on your conscience the burden of innocent bloodshed. Basically, what she does is that she protects him from his present. Why? Because Saul is pursuing David for no legitimate reason. But if David does this, Saul gets a legitimate reason, and all Israel will accept, David should be hunted. How dare you kill an entire household because of an insult? So she protects him from his present and protects him for his future. Why? Because once he would be king and the Lord would make it happen, Israel would not be able to trust David fully. You know how you feel? Me, my boss, I have known what he has done before. If he is king, maybe when he is boss, his anger, he doesn't have control over his anger. He doesn't have this and the other because of something that he would have done. And so she's telling him, for the sake of that future, do not do this. Ladies, many lessons here for us, but I do think men can learn something from this as well. Number one is that humility will always make a way for us. Ladies, humility will always make a way for us with our husbands. Tujaribu tena. Let's just try again. The other thing for us ladies is that submission is not quiet. You see, some of us will feel that sawa basi si alisema si he is the Lord over this home. Aya, let's see what happens. And you quietly wait for his downfall to say, na usikiange nikikwambia. You know I'm your helper. I was helping you. I am your Ezer Kenogdo. Submission is not quiet. It's also not being too fearful to say what you think should be done. There's a gentleman called David Guzik who calls it sweetly speaking submission. The idea is not to be silent, but to remind our husbands in a way that lifts them and re-envisions them, not beating them down, lifts them and re-envisions them of the fact that they are godly men, that they are godly fathers, that they are godly husbands, that they are godly bosses, that they are godly employees. The idea is to remind him who he is. After the small things had been done, you have asked for forgiveness, you have paid back what you owe, all those things. Now you begin. And I think when God helps us to be able to do this, and you re-envision him and remind him that he is a godly man, remind him what a godly man should be like, remind him what a godly father should be like, a godly husband, a godly employee, a godly boss, and all of that, it is likely if our men are Davids and not Nabals. Because you know, of Nabal, the servant said, he is such a wicked man, no one can say anything to him. Which means even his own Abigail could probably not say anything to him. And so if God has helped us and we have Davids and not Nabals, it is possible that our husbands will turn and say, admit, I was on a sinful course, and God bless you and thank you for turning me away from my sinful course. I don't know, is it possible that it's possible that they might turn and listen to us when we re-envision them in a way that lifts them and not beating them over the head with the Bible. Yeah? Someone might ask, so lakini now Abigail and Nabal, how do you as Abigail end up with Nabal? Kwani you were not intelligent before, did it come on? Can I tell you some bad news? You In their time, we can understand. Arranged marriages, all of that jazz, we can understand how Abigail can end up with Nabal. But my dear sister, if you have a Nabal in your home now, you chose him for yourself. Right now, there are no arranged marriages. And now you want the Lord to strike him dead that you might go with the David. But let me tell you what the scriptures tell us in Corinthians. If an unbelieving husband, and here I'm hoping believing husbands are Davids. I'm hoping there is no believing husband who is a Nabal. My sister, if you're married to an unbelieving man, a Nabal, the Bible says that you are not to leave him. If he leaves you, good. But you're not to leave him. You chose him for yourself. What you must do is be humble, intelligent, wise, demure. And by chance, the Lord might change the man. This is my bad news for you. Now, I lifers, mukienda naivasha, choose Davids and not Nabals. Aya. Na hii kitu nimesema mara mingi kwa hii pulpit, si ndio? Aya. In conclusion, let me conclude. Back to Nabal. It is very interesting to note that everyone in Nabal's household is fully aware of the wrath, of the danger, of death coming to the household, save for Nabal himself. He is banqueting like a king, eating and drinking like a king, while people are outside fighting to save him and his household. It's possible that Jesus had Nabal in mind when he gave the parable of the rich fool, isn't it? You have torn down the smaller ones. You have built bigger barns because, see, we are assuming in sheep shearing, uko animals were giving birth. So, you have torn down the small barns. Men, you can learn from this. You have built bigger ones. Now you are reveling in the riches that the Lord has given you. And Jesus said, your life will be required from you tonight. Is that not what happened to Nabal? It is God who struck him dead. And this is something else, by the way, we should notice. We can see things as refusing to pay watchmen and boys on the roads and housekeepers, as a small thing. But they seem to be, they point to a bigger problem in the heart that actually led to God striking Nabal dead. And so it can look like ni tabia mbaya tuache tabia mbaya. But it could point to an issue that can bring that kind of judgment and wrath from God. The rich fool was probably Nabal. So, I was saying, it is interesting to note that only Nabal is unaware of the danger. Everyone else is very aware of what is happening. And it is like this for you if you are living in sin. You are reveling in your hedonistic life, unaware of the wrath that is looming over you. Everyone else seems aware of it. People are pleading with you to receive the Lord. People are pleading with you to turn away from your sin and turn to the Lord for the salvation of your soul. But what do? You hurl insults and say, who is the Lord? Why should I stop reveling on account of him? And you continue banqueting like the king or the queen that you are. It is possible that everyone is aware of the danger. Everyone is pleading with you to receive the Lord. You're hurling insults at the Lord. Do not be a Nabal, and do not let folly go with you. Today, turn to the Lord. Turn away from your sin and turn to the Lord. Later on, when Reverend Maura comes up, he will tell you where our prayer corner is, our prayer tent, and you can come there, and someone will help you to make that decision. In conclusion, I want to finish and say so many lessons, so many things to learn from the story of David and the people that he meets along the way, so many things to adjust in our lives. May God help us. Amen.